So to kick things up today, we're going to basically recap a little bit of what we heard today. We heard from Robinhood, we heard from Wealthfront, we're going to hear from Ellevest in just a bit. So what we want to do is sort of just aggregate maybe some of the themes that we've heard from today. So if we go back to 1968, obviously the American dream was to own a home. And today, in 2018, the American dream, depending on what you think, is still to own a home. So if you look at sort of according to US Census Bureau data, homeownership rates are highest for homeowners about 65 and older, and lowest for the under 35 cohort at about 36%. But that 36% is actually pretty revealing because it's increased over 30 to 40% year over year. So we're seeing sort of an increase in millennials at least wanting to own homes. We had Regis Sedaris from Rocket Mortgage last year at our conference, and he told us that 2/3 of people who are opening accounts on Rocket are buying a home, and half of those are millennials. According to a survey from Apartment List, about 80% of millennial renters do want to actually own a home as well. Of course, they may not be able to afford that today, and millennials, of course, differ by cohort, age, et cetera. But by 2030, millennials will hold about 5 times as much wealth as they do today, and expected to control as much as 25 trillion worth of wealth globally, with baby boomers expected to pass down another 30 trillion by 2050. So certainly, if you believe the statement that if you tend to overestimate the change that happens in 2 years but underestimate it in 10 years, certainly companies that position themselves as trusted brands to people in their 20s and 30s today could stand to reap pretty big benefits down the line. Of course, how they get there, I think, is what's most interesting, and we think that's probably most apt to change over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's really across 3 different vectors. One is sort of acquiring customers and thinking about customer acquisition. The other is around product strategy, different considerations that we're seeing startups and different companies provide today to attract millennials to their products. And of course, ultimately, this results in changes to the business model as well. So if we look at customer acquisition, obviously, spending time on mobile devices is where millennials are, about 3.3 hours spent on a mobile device today. And if you think about apps like Instagram, for example, people spend upwards of 30 minutes a day viewing Instagram stories, et cetera. So finding ways to sort of be where millennials are spending their time is obviously of utmost importance. And there's sort of something to be said that incumbents might not be meeting the expectations of millennial customers on mobile devices. We look at some of the companies that spoke today compared to maybe some of the other firms that we've heard from, like Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade and others. The expectations are changing much quicker than maybe the technology can keep up with. So earlier we heard from Wealthfront in sort of their app to basically take you on a path to plan a home, and using a lot of different third-party data, as well as gamification methods to really engage millennials to put them on a path to think about some of these goals over time. We've also seen, obviously, startups, as we think about sort of the unbundling phase of companies, focus very heavily on a clean UI, single product, sort of transparent, lower fees, versus household name brands. You can see some of the differences, obviously, between newer brands and older ones here. And it's interesting, millennials also tend to invest differently, right? They invest in brands that they trust. If you look at the top stocks held on Robinhood, for example, it's firms like Facebook, Apple, and others. And this is also we also see a lot of changes happening across product strategy. So fintech startups today are attracting millions of first-time investors to the market, whether those are firms that are acquiring investors in cryptocurrencies or sort of micro investments, as we see with companies like Stash and Acorns, to traditional stock brokerage and other products. And you see sort of now companies now in the millions of users, but we're seeing different sort of product considerations used today. We heard from Vlad Tenev, for example, earlier today, that the addition of cryptocurrencies was really a customer acquisition tool. You can see some of the sort of before and after of when companies added cryptocurrencies to and you can see the millions of users that resulted in part from that. Square Cash, for example, offers sort of Bitcoin trading and made about $200,000 in profit, but in the meantime also gained a number of users because of that. Obviously, we've seen sort of incumbent firms also enter the space. Fidelity, rumored to be plotting a cryptocurrency exchange as well, and we'll be hearing from them tomorrow on the brokerage side. Of course, there's still barriers when we think about cryptocurrency, for example, before it replaces sort of the staples of financial services based on sort of market size today, and obviously some of the staples like assets held in ETFs. And ultimately, though, this results in changes to the business model of wealth management if some of these companies do scale to be sort of the trusted brands of tomorrow. Over half of millennials actually believe they would change their brokerage if they offered commission-free trading. And if you believe that the millions of users who are adopting commission-free trading apps and those users will become more value over time, it's sort of an arbitrage against the amount it costs to acquire a brokerage account today for people who offer them and $5 to $10 trades. Of course, startups are looking to undercut fees, incumbents with competitive, transparent fees. You see some of the different models and firms here relative to each other. And ultimately, as Jan Hammer from Index Ventures tells us, the evolution of financial services will be driven by new, sort of beautifully designed products, new revenue models, and ultimately these products will be free to the end user. And we're seeing some of that already today. Of course, fintech companies who are trying to position themselves as these brands will need to iterate quickly, evolve quickly, and we're seeing some of them do that already. But moving into other products, like maybe perhaps in-house asset management products or banking products, and we're already seeing some of the formative beginnings of that. And incumbents will also need to position themselves accordingly as well, thinking about some of these product considerations, some of the changes that are taking place, and thinking about perhaps where we might start to see some changes in terms of the next generation in the next 10 to 20 years over time. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cam, who will introduce Ellevest, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.